Fairfield High School for the annual Veterans Day program that is sponsored by American Legion Post 47 in coordination with Fairfield High School staff and student body. Thank you, community members, students, staff, and most importantly, to our many veterans that have served our country that are here today with us. Veterans, we are honored to be in your presence. Everything for our country, for us. All we can do is remember. Students and community, as we go through this program, please remember. At this time, we will have transition. At this time, I would like to welcome our Master of Ceremonies, Sergeant First Class, retired James T. Stoltz.
Thank you for that inspiring video. Welcome to you in the Fairfield High School audience, and to those of you listening on the radio to the annual Veterans Day ceremonies. Veterans Day was first proclaimed as Armistice Day by U.S. President Woodrow Wilson on November 11, 1919. Major hostilities of World War I were formally ended on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month of 1918 with the German signing of the armistice. In proclaiming the holiday, President Wilson said, "To us in America, the reflections of Armistice Day will be filled with solemn pride and the heroism of those who died in our country's service, and with gratitude for the victory, both because of the thing from which it has freed us and because of the opportunity it has given America to show her sympathy with peace and justice in the councils of the nations." For many years, Americans have paused to honor and thank military veterans for their service. Originally, Armistice Day was only to recognize veterans who died in World War I. President Dwight Eisenhower signed into law on May 26, 1954, to change it to All Veterans Day, and on June 1, 1954, Congress amended this act, replacing armistice with veterans, and it has been known as Veterans Day since. So today, we honor and pay tribute to those 24 million military veterans in the United States. As you listen to the music, the singing, and the words of our speakers today, remember that you have a veteran to thank for that privilege. Jan Hunter-Dost will now sing the national anthem, accompanied by the Fairfield High School band, directed by Mr. Janetsky. Will you stand if you are able?
See, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming. And the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, it proved through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, sing us that star-spangled banner yet wave, o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave.
Thank you, Jan. In a few moments, we will stand and recite the Pledge of Allegiance together. But before we do, I would like to share with you a little history about its origin. The Pledge of Allegiance was written in 1892 by Francis Bellamy, who was a Baptist minister. The original Pledge of Allegiance was published in the September 8, 1892 issue of the popular children's magazine, The Youth's Companion, as part of the National Public School celebration of Columbus Day, a celebration of the 400th anniversary of Christopher Columbus's arrival in the Americas. The event was conceived and promoted as a campaign to instill the idea of American nationalism by selling flags to public schools and magazines to students. The original 22-word pledge read as follows: I pledge allegiance to my flag and the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Since that time, the Pledge of Allegiance has been modified 4 times to its present form with 31 words. The most recent change coming in 1954 to add the words "under God." Most of the adults and maybe some of the youth in the audience today will remember a comedian and actor named Red Skelton. Mr. Skelton is probably best remembered for his TV characters such as Freddie the Freeloader, Clem Diddlehopper, San Fernando Red, and many others. However, he was also a World War II veteran and very patriotic. On January 14, 1969, on national television, on the Red Skelton Hour, he talked about when he was in school and about reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. This is what he said: I had this one teacher. He was the principal of Harrison School. To me, he was the greatest teacher, a real sage of my time. He had such wisdom. We were all reciting the Pledge of Allegiance one day, and he walked over. This little old teacher, Mr. Lastwell was his name. He said, I've been listening to you boys and girls recite the Pledge of Allegiance all semester, and it seems as though it's becoming monotonous to you. If I may I recite it and try to explain to you the meaning of each word? And thus he said, I, me, an individual of one, pledge, dedicate all my worldly goods to give without self-pity. Allegiance, my love and my devotion to the flag, our standard, Old Glory, a symbol of freedom, of the United. That means we have all come together. States, individual communities that have united into 48 great states, 48 individual communities with pride and dignity and purpose, all divided with imaginary boundaries, yet united in a common purpose, and that's love of country, of America, and to the Republic. Republic, a state in which sovereign power is invested in representatives chosen by the people to govern, and the government is the people, and it's from the people to the leaders, not from the leaders to the people, for which it stands, one nation, being so blessed by God, indivisible, incapable of being divided, with liberty, which is freedom, the right of power to live one's life without threats or fear or any sort of retaliation, and justice, the principle and quality of dealing fairly with others, for all, which means, boys and girls, it's as much your country as it is mine. Mr. Skelton went on to say, since I was a small boy, 2 states have been added to our country, and 2 words have been added to the Pledge of Allegiance, under God. And he went on to say, wouldn't it be a pity if someday someone would say, that's a prayer, and that would be eliminated from our schools too. If you were able, would you rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Seated. Please remain seated. The invitation by Reverend Pastor
It's good to get a little exercise. Let us pray. Lord God, creator of the heavens and the earth, we come before you today in remembrance of those who have fought and died for the freedom that we experience in being able to meet today without fear of reprisal. Help us to never forget the sacrifices of the men and women who have gone before us. Please continue to be with their families as they suffer their losses. Let us also remember those who have suffered injuries and memories that have changed their lives forever. We ask for wisdom for our world leaders that we might one day live in peace. We pray for guidance for our military leaders and for safety for all those who are serving at this time to maintain peace in other lands as well as at home. I ask this in the name of Jesus the Christ. Amen.
Please be seated. We'll now have a selection of patriotic music by the Fairfield High School Chamber Choir, conducted by Mr. Zach Ryder, accompanied by the Fairfield High School Band, directed by Mr. Jim Etchell. Thank you, Chamber Choir and Band. Wasn't that inspirational? Let's give them another hand. For several years, Fairfield High School students have been chosen to attend Boys State at Camp Dodge, Johnston, Iowa, and recently Girls State on the campus of Iowa State University, Ames, Iowa. Both were held in June of this year. Boys State is sponsored by the American Legion, and Girls State by the American Legion Auxiliary. Both programs are designed as a training program in citizenship and democracy. This year's attendees were Jamani Linder, Megan Palmer, and Max Slow. They will share with you their experience and highlights of their participation. Speaking first will be Jamani Linder. He is a senior and enjoys playing soccer. Jamani?
Good morning. I'll be just giving a brief introduction and explanation of my experience at the American Legion Boys State that I attended over the summer. It all started junior year when I was called down to the office from study hall. The first thought that ran through my head was, uh-oh. Another detention for tardies during first hour? I'm a deep sleeper, so getting up is usually harder than acing a math test for me. But once I arrived, I was sent to Mr. Sadoff, who was the principal at the time, and who hopefully didn't have anything to say about my morning routine. As it turned out, he had something different on mind. He started explaining to me about the American Legion Boys State. So what is the American Legion Boys State? It is a 6-day camp at Fort Dodge, which is located near Des Moines, with the purpose of reenacting our government at the state level. When I arrived, we were all assigned a barracks and a political party. The political parties were either Federalists or Nationalists, and not Democrats or Republicans, so no one would get mad, you know? But like in any government, there were positions that would be voted for and filled. There were two types. There was ones at the state level, and these included positions like the governor, attorney general, and secretary of state. And the other was local, which included like sheriff, mayor, or city councilman. The first 3 days of the camp were dedicated to campaigning. And the way that worked was we'd be like in a barracks having a city meeting or something, and people would come in and try to convince us to vote for them. And most of them used tricks to try to get our attention, like imitating Schwarzenegger, or showing us magic card tricks, and doing stunts like backflips. I voted for the backflip guy. I thought that was pretty awesome. Once the third day came around, all the barracks marched to the headquarters, and we all alphabetically took turns voting in a ballot. And once all the positions got elected and we could function as a government, things got interesting. After elections, we wanted to rename our barracks from Gracious City to the Governor's Mansion. Just to remind everybody in whose barracks the elected governor was staying in. But 2 hours after we finished this, the paperwork for it, we faced a revolt and immediately scrapped the project. So we settled for a sign instead, a really big one. But everything that could happen in real life could also happen at Boys State. Like, for example, there were 2 state patrolmen, which were just federal police assigned to every barracks, and there was 1 sheriff in every county. And as things turned out, our own state patrolman arrested our sheriff for evading taxes. I thought that was pretty funny. But there was more to Boys State than just having a bunch of 17-year-olds arrest other 17-year-olds. Throughout the week, I had the opportunity to meet many intelligent people from a wide variety of backgrounds. Through teamwork and competition, I got to know many of them and make friendships that will last a long time. But in addition to that, there's something extra to actually participating in a government. When you actually try to use law, like we did to get our city name changed, you get a very real picture of what it's like to be in any branch of government. And that is something that no textbook will ever be able to describe to me. So overall, Boys State at Fort Dodge was a great week. I got firsthand experience on how the government works, which is very important because the government touches every part of our lives. Every part of our lives. And if you get the chance to attend, anybody here, take it. It's a great opportunity to meet many new people, and it is a very different experience that you only get once. Thank you.
Thank you. Hope your experience sounds like you had a great time. Megan Palmer, also a senior, is in the band, student council, a member of the swim team and the tennis team. She will share her experience at Girls State.
Today we learn, tomorrow we lead. This was this year's theme at the 66th Annual Iowa American Legion Auxiliary Girls State. This past June, I, along with 300 senior girls from across the state of Iowa, represented our high schools at Girls State. We spent a week on the campus at Iowa State University in Ames. Each year, there is a community service project Girls State does. This year, a request was made by Operation Military Kids to put together hero packs for the military children. The purpose of a hero pack is to show appreciation to the military children that are affected by the military deployment. The hero packs provide items that they might use to pass the time while their loved ones are gone. There are around 10,655 children under the age of 12 in Iowa that are military kids. The Operation Military Kids mission is to support the children of Iowa soldiers, sailors, Air Force, and Marines throughout the deployment period. As a group, we made 100 hero packs for the military kids, with items we brought to complete this community service project. We also wrote letters of appreciation for their sacrifices that they have had to make from their parents' service. It was an eventful week full of campaigning and speeches to gain positions in state government, from local positions to governor. We were visited by Governor Terry Branstad and special guest speakers throughout the week. I would like to thank the high school administration for nominating me to represent Fairfield. Also, a special thanks to the ladies of our local American Legion Auxiliary Chapter 47 for my sponsorship at the 2011 Iowa Girls State. Thank you.
Thank you, Megan. Great speech. I know she was a little nervous, but I think she got through it. Max Sloat, also a senior, is in the band and choir. You see he's got his nice clothes on here, so he really looks good today. Speech team, plays soccer, and is a member of the National Honor Society. Max?
I'm a bit taller than Megan, I apologize. Good morning. As you said, my name is Darian Maxwell Sloat. Like Jamie, I attended the Boys State camp over the summer. To reiterate what Jamie said, Boys State is a mock 51st state with a government run by select students from across Iowa. The goal of this recreation is to teach our nation's youth about how democracy works, while incorporating leadership building activities. The majority of our time at Boys State was spent learning how state-level elections and campaigns work in a learning by doing process. The camp's 700+ students can run for city, county, and state positions. I was a bit baffled during the first 2 days due to a severe lack of sleep prior to the camp, and ended up missing out on the deadline for becoming a candidate for state-level positions. However, I did run for town mayor and city board of supervisors. Each candidate was given the opportunity to present his views and platforms before elections. But many of us were stumped when it came time to cite our credentials. Everyone there was near the top of their class, or the captain of a sports team, or the head of their student council. All of the students there were impressive, making the votes and campaigning incredibly difficult. If only our real candidates were so impressive. No, just kidding. I was elected into both of the positions I ran for and spent the remaining 2 days learning what they do. Unfortunately, I had a sport-related accident on the day after I arrived, which ended up with my thumb being fractured, preventing me from participating in all of the camp's activities. However, I did get to become fast friends with all of the medics there. The most prominent aspect of Boise State, to me, was the outstanding quality of all the students, counselors, and staff members there. Every boy was kind and thoughtful, willing to lead and be led whenever necessary. The majority of our counselors were past or current servicemen, and it was evident throughout the entire camp how much they enjoyed teaching us about the democracy they had fought to defend. Since Boise State is held at Camp Dodge, it's run by members of the American Legion. There were a lot of military influences on what we did. For example, every day, our barracks were checked and examined by former servicemen, and they are strict. Bunks must be in order, floors must be swept, and everything from your bed to what you wore had to be totally uniform with everyone in the barracks. It definitely gave me a new respect for the cleaning skills of servicemen. At Boise State, I learned the complexities of how our democracy elects its officials from those who served to defend our democracy. I learned more about how to be a good leader and follower. I met caring medics, passionate speakers, dedicated counselors, and some of the brightest students Iowa has to offer. And for that, I am eternally grateful to both my Legionnaire compatriots and to the servicemen here today. Thank you.
You can be proud of your students at Fairfield High School. We have a great school and great programs and great job. Our address today comes from a man I've known and respected for over 40 years. He happens to be a cousin by marriage, so I do have to claim him, but he's been my friend for many years. He's been my general. Some of you know him as a Fairfield High School graduate in 1951. Others as a center for the Iowa Hawkeye football team, played center in 1954. He was offered the opportunity to play professionally for the 49ers, but instead chose to serve his country in the United States Army. As an active duty soldier for over 24 years, he was placed in positions of leadership and shape training in the United States Army. As an infantry officer in Vietnam, he saw the commitment of servicemen and women as they performed their duty for country, and as some of them gave their life for it. After leaving the United States Army in 1979, he became the Deputy Adjutant General of the Iowa National Guard, and in 1985 was appointed Adjutant General. Under his leadership and command, the Iowa National Guard was transformed to a National Guard that today is recognized as one of the best in the nation. Even after retiring as commander of the Iowa National Guard in 1999, he continued to serve on committees that impacted the direction of the National Guard to become a force that is relied on more and more every year for situations here and abroad. It is my great honor to present to you today one of the first Fairfield High School Wall of Honor inductees of 2004. Please give a Fairfield warm welcome to Major General Warren G. Lawson.
Let me say that I'm tremendously pleased to be home here today and to have the opportunity to celebrate with you on this Veterans Day. You know, since I retired 12 years ago, I've done almost no public speaking. As a matter of fact, when I retired, I told my secretary, Florence, even if anybody calls and asks me to speak, tell them I don't do that anymore. And frankly, I have held hard and fast on that, except one occasion, when the Command Sergeant Major of the Iowa Guard asked me a couple of weeks ago to speak for them, and I did at their annual get-together. And then Donnie Samuelson, who unfortunately is not with us here today, Donnie Samuelson come over to my house one night. I don't know, Lane, it must have been about 3 months ago or so. And he said, hey, Lane Bush and Jim Saltz called and want you to speak on Veterans Day in Fairfield. I said, Donnie, I don't do that anymore. And let that go. And the next night he stopped over by the house and we were talking Hawkeye football and stuff. And he said, hey, you know, I'll make you a deal. You go down there and speak on Veterans Day and I'll introduce you. I said, that looks pretty good. So tell him okay. And then Donnie went and got his hip fixed. So he ain't here. But I thank Jim. You know, cousins are really good for some things. And he made that sound very, very applauding. And I know my mother, she's out at Sunnybrook, and I went in there and turned on the radio this morning, so God willing, my Wilma's listening, and she would enjoy hearing that as well, and she'd know that most of it is true. You know, today is the day that we pause to salute veterans. People who offered some of his or hers most vital years to the service to their nation in the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Marines, members of the Coast Guard, and in World War II, the Merchant Marines. It's a day that we pause to say thank you to those that have given part of their life in service to their nation. And as a matter of fact, it especially applies to those who paid the supreme sacrifice and never returned to these green, green fields of home that we call Iowa. And in order to appropriately salute those veterans, it seems to me that we need to talk about what Iowans have done for their military and throughout history. And so I'd like to review a little of that. When I came back to Iowa in 1979 and went to work in the Adjutant General's office, I found myself frequently being called down to the Capitol for this or that, and I was tremendously impressed by the statues outside the Capitol. Here's a Korean War monument. Here's a monument to soldiers that were serving in Vietnam. Here's a World War I monument. And then you go inside and you see in the Capitol, on every corner of the rotunda, flags of units that were in the Civil War, in the Spanish-American War, in the World War I, a giant mural, perhaps 30 feet long, showing the return of the 168 Infantry from World War I, where they had been the premier regiment of the premier division of that war. Oh, indeed, I was so impressed with that. My mind said to me, God, there must be a history that goes along with that. And so I decided to research that history, and I start with the Civil War. In the Civil War, history reflects that Governor Kirkwood was the governor of Iowa at that time. He lived on a farm just outside of Coralville. The seat of government was just outside of, was in Iowa City. And the President Lincoln asked for a regiment to fight for the Union cause. The message came into Davenport, was carried by a man on horseback up to this farm in Coralville. And the governor summoned his Secretary of State. They discussed it, and they decided to put out the call to see if they could muster a regiment of infantry. Now, the spirit was high in Iowa at that time, and they didn't muster a regiment of infantry, but they mustered 49 regiments of infantry, 9 cavalry regiments, and 4 artillery batteries to respond to the Union cry. 76,000 Iowans responded to their flag. That was 11% of the population and the highest per capita contribution of any of the Union states, and created an outstanding record, but paid a tremendously heavy price. The first unit up Lookout Mountain in Tennessee was an Iowa unit. Iowans led Grant's charge at Vicksburg, where the only unit to breach that bastion of Vicksburg was an Iowa unit. Iowans marched with Sherman on his march to the sea, and the cost was often high. 1 out of 4 killed in Shiloh was an Iowan. The largest impressive monument at Andersonville, that famous Confederate prison, is the Iowa Monument, attesting to the price that was paid in that prison during that Civil War. Oh, indeed, Iowans fought in virtually every battle and marched in the victory parade. In fact, last Sunday's Des Moines Register, there was a story about George Washington Kincaid, a man from Muscatine, that decided that he wanted to muster the senior citizen kind of brigade. It was called the Graybeards. All these men in that brigade were over the military age. The average age of that brigade was 57. Over 100 were in their 60s. Several dozen were in their 70s. And one old gentleman by the name of Curtis King was 84 years old when he marched to the Union drum. Oh, and if you come forward in the history, the Spanish-American War. Well, you can look at one corner of the Capitol, and you can find the colors of the 49th, the 50th, the 51st, and 52nd Infantry Regiment. This was a war in a far-off land, but our Iowans responded, and responded with willingness. Similarly, the colors were planted on the Mexican border, and in June 1916, Iowans went to the Mexican border, did their duty there, and returned only in time to respond to World War I. And in that war, we ought to be proud. It was 117,000 Iowans participated in that war, and many deployed with the 42nd Infantry Rainbow Division. The Rainbow Division was the premier division of the American contribution to that war, and the 168 Infantry was its most impressive regiment. Oh, indeed, their homecoming is displayed on that giant mural that would stretch as long as perhaps that whole side of the auditorium there. A giant mural across from the governor's office in our capital. Oh, indeed, if you want to know how your Iowans did, read a book, American Caesar. It's about General Douglas MacArthur's life, and he is quoted in that book by saying the tough assignments in World War I went to his Iowans. And he called them his Iowans because his father, Arthur MacArthur, also commanded Iowans in the Spanish-American War a year earlier. In World War II, that history of contribution remains. Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine, members of the Coast Guard, all Iowans served with pride. I'm old enough to remember that. I can remember that everything was aimed at that war effort. And these old gray heads down here in front, I'm sure that they can tell you stories of their contribution in World War II. My contribution was to go out and pick up salvage metal, save tinfoil off of gum wrappers and things like that until you got it all boxed up, and then you took it over to Anderson's coal yard. Have a paper drive about once the whole nation was turned towards the World War II effort. And as a matter of fact, I recall when the 34th Infantry Red Coal Division was mustered here in Fairfield, and they assembled down beside the CB&Q track, and then they formed a convoy down there, a convoy that was led to Louisiana where they would create combat capability, a convoy led by a Guy's civilian car. Oh, indeed, that unit was the first one unit trained up for combat. First unit in the American Army trained up for combat. They were the first deployed to Europe, and they went to Northern Ireland to continue their training. And while in Northern Ireland, the Americans decided that they wanted units of special capability. Rangers, they were to be called. And the first battalion of Rangers was called Darby's Rangers. And 60% of the membership of Darby's Rangers come out of that Iowa division. Oh, indeed. That unit went and reconstituted itself and got ready for deployment again. And I remember that they were the first American unit deployed in combat in World War II. And I remember as a young lad reading headlines in the paper that talked about how our Iowans had been caught at a place called the Kasserine Pass in North Africa. And we lost over 1,000 men killed and captured in the course of a single day. But our Iowans reconstituted again and proved themselves at a location called Hill 609, and then went on to evict the Desert Fox, General Rommel from the German army, and his panzers from North Africa, and then they crossed over the Mediterranean and worked up the boot of Italy, and places called Sicily, and Mount Pantano, and Volturno, and Anzio, and the Po Valley are all places that our soldiers spilled their blood but achieved proud victories. And when that war was over, they had records that still exist yet today of 517 days of continuous combat at the terrible, terrible price of 2,500 dead and 22,000 casualties out of that single division, but not without honor. 11 medals of honor were awarded to that division out of 214 for all services during the war. And indeed, our sons and daughters have served heroically and proudly in other wars that were much less popular, but no less important. They were also wars that their blood was spilled in defense of freedom. Oh, indeed, both Korea and Vietnam, in both places, were struggling for freedom, but there was no threat to this country. And so those become unpopular wars, and our soldiers and sailors later faced off against the oppressors of freedom in Grenada and Panama and Somalia and Bosnia and Kosovo and Desert Shield and Desert Storm and Desert Freedom and Afghanistan and Iraq yet today. Oh, indeed. If you noted the starting tape, over 25 million Americans are veterans within this country. And sadly, 1,085,000 Americans have died in defense of freedom. And you know, these Americans that never came home swore an oath that most Americans, not the veterans, but most Americans have never heard. Every soldier, sailor, airman, Marine, and member of the Coast Guard swears an oath that says, I do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, that I will obey the orders of the President of the United States and the orders of the officers appointed over me, that I make this obligation freely, without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, so help me God. For that oath, and 1,085,000 died by that oath. And so on days like today, that oath serves at a rallying point to celebrate that there once lived in Fairfield, Iowa, and the surrounding community, Iowans who so loved their nation that they were willing to swear that oath and if necessary died by that oath. And when I consider the price that they paid, I'm so proud that I could break out into tears. And yet days like this need not be sad occasions. In fact, I look on it with some degree of gladness that there once walked on this earth in Fairfield, Iowa, and Jefferson County, Iowa, Americans who were living monuments to the fact that certain ideals are worth protecting with one's life. You know, in Arlington National Cemetery, there's the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. And there's an inscription on the side of that tomb that speaks for all American casualties of war. It says, not for fame or reward, not for place or ambition, not for rank, nor lured by ambition or goaded by necessity, but in simple obedience to their duty as they understood it. These men suffered all, sacrificed all, dared all, and died. They died because they saw the worth of the nation and were willing to respond to the nation's call. They, like all veterans that have served in all of our services, saw the value of freedom, and were willing to follow the nation's lead in preserving it. And that's what Veterans Day is all about. It's a pause in our daily activities to say thank you for your service. So you high school students, when this thing is over, before you go back to class, grab one of these old gray heads down here in front by the hand and say, thank you for your service. Indeed, that's going to be more impressive to all of these veterans than about anything that could be done. I will tell you, it is always my pleasure to come back to Fairfield. It has been a special pleasure for me today, and I am beholden to Lane Bush and my cousin Jim Saltz up here, because Bobby and I don't do much of this anymore. As a matter of fact, second speech in 12 years. And you folks that know me when I was the adjutant general, 2 or 3 or 4 a week was kind of the standard. But it's always a pleasure to come home. God bless you all. My pleasure to be here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, General. Those words to reflect on and give thanks to our veterans. Dan Hunterdos will now sing God Bless America. I invite you to stand and remain standing at the end of the benediction by Reverend
God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above. From the mountains to the prairies, to the oceans, white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. From the mountains to the prairies, to the oceans, white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet home.
May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and rain down special blessings on those who have served to keep us in peace. Amen.
You may be seated. The American Legion has been conducting Memorial Day and Veteran Day ceremonies in Fairfield for many years. The annual Veterans Day program is sponsored by American Legion Post 47 in coordination with Fairfield High School staff. We appreciate all that they do to help us remember and honor the military veterans of this community and nation. Thank you to members of the Veterans of Foreign Wars and all volunteers who for years have posted the flags in Central Park for all to see that Fairfield is a community that cares about its veterans. I would also like to recognize the color guard and Veterans of Foreign Wars, the VFW Auxiliary, the AMVETS, American Legion Post 47, the American Legion Auxiliary, and the Fairfield Elks Club for posting the colors on stage today. Certainly a special thanks to all who helped make this ceremony a success. Jan Hunterdos, who for many years has blessed us with her beautiful voice, Reverend Diane Brockman, Lane Bush, and Dave Pesh for their tireless efforts in organizing this ceremony, Mr. Edgston and the FSH Band, Mr. Ryder and the Chamber Choir, Principal Aaron Becker, our student speakers, Delani Belinda, Megan Palmer, and Max Sloat, and the entire high school administration for permitting us to use this auditorium and help with the sound, lights, and stage. And of course, our speaker today, Major General Warren G. Lawson. Thank you, students, for your attention, and I hope that you have gained something from this assembly. Mr. Becker will now come forward and dismiss the students.
Again, I want to thank everybody for coming and being attentive for this great program. I want to thank the guest speaker one more time, Major General retired Warren G. Lawson, for coming to share his message today. It was a great message, and I would invite our students to do, just as he told us to do, come shake one of our veterans' hands. We have that opportunity. I think it's a powerful thing that we need to do to thank everything that they've done for us. I do want to also thank everyone that was involved in the American Legion, from the American Legion Post 47 for organizing this Veterans Day program. We look forward to it every single year. It's always a great program, great message, and it's another way that we can get involved with our community. Students, before we dismiss, students that are going on the thespian trip, you need to stay here with Mr. Selecta. Students, you may be dismissed for third hour, but thank you and have a great Veterans Day. Thank you all for coming.
Unfortunately,